Mr. President, last Friday I was in Chicago for the formal ceremonial investiture of a new federal district court judge named April Perry. April Perry has an interesting story that brought her to the bench. The story starts with her nomination to serve as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. That includes the city of Chicago. And she was extremely well qualified for that position and went through the Judiciary Committee at the time. I was chairing it, and went through without a hitch. She was approved and on the list of U.S. attorneys. Now, historically, U.S. attorneys were chosen by voice vote. When President Trump is in his first term in office, I believe he had around 90 U.S. attorneys spread all across the United States, and all but one, perhaps, I'm trying to make sure I'm accurate here, all but one was approved by voice vote. Now look what happens. To bring U.S. attorney before us is a much different process today. What happened? The Democrats gave President Trump all of his U.S. attorney nominees in his first term, with perhaps one exception, by voice vote. Now it goes through an elaborate, time-consuming process. What happened? The Vice President of the United States happened. Vice President J.D. Vance of the state of Ohio decided to come to the floor during the Biden administration after we had approved 63 U.S. attorneys and to object to a voice vote. No, he said, we're going to go through the regular process. I don't like the way the Department of Justice has treated former president at the time, Donald Trump, and so we're going to insist that you dot all the I's and cross all the T's and go through the process and take several days on each one of the U.S. attorney nominees. He made that decision after 63 had been approved under Biden, and he made it when April Perry was pending. This was her chance, the Northern District of Illinois. And J.D. Vance said, no, not the ordinary process, not a voice vote. We're going to take our time. And he applied the standard not just to my U.S. attorney in Illinois, but to his own U.S. attorney in Cleveland, Ohio. He was resolute. We're going to stop the way this has been done in the past. That was literally the end of consideration of U.S. attorneys under Joe Biden. If that was his goal, J.D. Vance's goal, our vice president's goal, he achieved it. So what happened next to April Perry? A wonderfully qualified nominee ready for U.S. attorney. Well, we sat down and decided that we didn't want to waste that talent. And I went to her and said, would you consider the vacancy for the U.S. District Court that is open now? You've gone through the vetting, they've gone through the background checks, the FBI's asked all the hard questions, they've interviewed all the attorneys you worked with, and everybody finds you acceptable. Would you consider the federal bench? And she said yes, and she was approved. And we had her formal investiture this last Friday. Those are happy occasions, and there aren't many of them, I'm sure, in the federal courthouse, at least not of this caliber. And District Court Judge Virginia Kendall, who is a presiding judge over the Northern District, called together her colleagues to witness this investiture, this happy day for new judge April Perry. She brought in about 30 federal district court judges from the Northern District and a number from the 9th District or 7th District of the appellate court. And it dawned on me as I attended this ceremony for April Perry that this has turned out to be an important part of my Senate career. If you'd asked me when I ran for the Senate, what about the appointment of judges? I'd say, well, that's fairly routine. Turns out it's not. It's more than routine. It's one of the more important things you do, because the men and women chosen to serve in the federal court system, Article III judges, are appointed for life. For life. To remove them, you have to go through an impeachment through Congress to remove a federal court judge. That's how important it is. That's how permanent it is, the permanent nature of it. And that's why each selection makes a difference. I looked at the 30 or so judges who gathered and realized that I had had a hand in appointing every single one of them, and many others too. And so you go through that process a number of times and you learn. I look back now on all of the district court judges that I've had a hand in choosing, and I will tell you, for 2 or 3, it was a mistake. If I had it to do over again, I would have asked more questions and I would have had more information on those who were chosen. But that's over a span of 29 years, 2 or 3. Those who were approved, dozens of others, have really done well, and they've been praised for the job that they did. So when I was chairman of this committee, fortunate to have that opportunity, we approved in a 4-year period of time a record number of federal court judges, 235. President Trump in his first term had done 234. We passed him by 1 court judge. And I'm proud of that because it was a lot of hard work. We had, in order to report a judge out of the Judiciary Committee, every single Democrat had to be in their seats for every minute of the vote. There was no proxy. You had to be there. And they showed up, and Senator Blumenthal was one of those. Senator Welch has joined us now in the Judiciary Committee, and I salute them. But now, under the second term of President Trump, the rules are changing. They weren't very good the first round, and they're worse now. The first Trump administration put forward some of the most extreme judicial nominees ever considered by the Senate. Several Trump nominees had little or no experience in a courtroom, no litigation experience. Would you hire a lawyer to take your case to trial if they had never been in a trial in their lives? 3 district court nominees, Catherine Mizell, Justin Walker, and Sarah Pitlick, won unanimous support from committee Republicans despite having never tried a case. Imagine you're going in a courtroom, you're presiding over a trial. You've never seen one. You've never been in one. You may have seen something on television. You keep looking for Perry Mason and wondering what's next. That, unfortunately, was a reality with many of these nominees in Trump's first term. And many Trump nominees took some unusual, if not controversial, if not just plain wrong decisions. Lawrence Van Dyke, 9th Circuit nominee. We asked him to affirm that he would be fair to LGBTQ individuals. He wouldn't say it. Just couldn't get the words out of his mouth. Michael Troncale, an Eastern District nominee, said of President Obama, he was, quote, an un-American imposter. Those are the words of this man seeking the federal bench about the former president. He said he would, quote, bow to Arab sheiks and other world leaders. Where did you find that nominee? The first Trump administration put forward, get this now, 10 judicial nominees who the American Bar Association found to be not qualified to serve on the federal bench. 10 of them. Well, what's the American Bar Association got to do with this? Historically, the American Bar Association did its own background check on nominees for the federal bench. Where would they go? Well, they would go in the community. They would go to the judges that this person has appeared before. They would go to the fellow attorneys. They would try to find character references, and they would dig deep. And they had some basic rules. You had to have 10 years of experience as an attorney to even be considered for the federal bench. And then they rated people qualified, not qualified, well qualified, and such. Over the strong objections of Senate Democrats, 8 of the unqualified nominees proposed by President Trump in his first term were confirmed by Senate Republicans. So even when the American Bar Association says you're unqualified to serve on the bench, it didn't discourage the loyalists supporting President Trump. Incidentally, under the Biden administration, 235 federal judges, how many of them, Durbin, give us the truth here, how many of them were found unqualified? None. Every one of the 235 were found qualified by the American Bar Association. As a former chairman of the committee said, elections have consequences, and I get it. So I understand that the second Trump administration is going to offer nominees closer to him in political philosophy. But President Trump seems intent on outdoing himself by putting forth nominees who are extreme, partisan, and fundamentally unqualified. Instead of finding more qualified judicial nominees, Attorney General Bondi ordered the Justice Department to stop cooperating with the American Bar Association in rating nominees. She didn't want to run into the embarrassment that they did in the first Trump term, with 10 of them being found unqualified. So she said the way to solve that problem is not to find a better nominee, it's to get rid of the American Bar Association. If they're not going to give a grade to these nominees, we don't have to worry about their being unqualified. She overturned a practice that had been in place for nearly 70 years, going back to a fellow named Dwight David Eisenhower. Both Republican and Democratic presidents had followed the rule. Now the only qualification that President Trump looks for in his judicial nominees, and he says as much, is loyalty. Show me loyalty or get the heck off the bench. Look no further than Amal Bove's nomination to the Third Circuit. As a senior official in the Justice Department, Mr. Bove has done nothing but cater to President Trump's every whim. It's no surprise that President Trump said he had nominated Mr. Bove because he would, quote, do anything that is necessary to make America great again. For life. Judge for life. Show me loyalty, and you got a position for life. Mr. Bove personally ordered the termination of federal prosecutors who put violent January 6 rioters in prison. Understand what happened here. Men and women, professional attorneys working for the Department of Justice, were given assignments. We have a case we want you to pursue and prosecute. It's this individual. Here's the FBI background file. Go to work. Turns out these people are the ones that stormed through that door and went rifled through our desk and aped for photographs sitting in your chair, Mr. President, on January 6th. As a result of their entering this building, 5 Capitol policemen died and 140 were assaulted. Should they have been prosecuted? You bet. Beat up on a cop, you should face the consequences. And they did it on January 6th in the name of stopping the election the American people had been involved in just weeks before. I was here sitting in this chair as the head of the Capitol Police stood where you're sitting, Mr. President, and told us all, stay calm, stay in your chairs, we're going to stay in this room, this is a safe room, and just stay in your seats. They grabbed the Vice President Pence, took him right out that door, and spirited him off somewhere, but they left us here. 10 minutes later, the same policeman stood up and said, new announcement, leave as quickly as possible. We can't keep this room secure. The Senate of the United States of America, the capital of the United States of America, was being run over by demonstrators and insurrectionists. They were beating up on the police, smashing their heads into the wall and between doorlings, and they were ultimately prosecuted for it. And the prosecutors, the assistant U.S. attorneys who were doing this job, were treated in what way by President Trump when he got back in office? They were treated like they were the ones who broke the law. The prosecutors were accused of wrongdoing. Well, that unfortunately is, in the words of Mr. Bove, a grave national injustice. He thinks it is to prosecute these demonstrators. He's wrong. What was a grave injustice is what happened to the police on that day. When asked to justify his actions in firing his U.S. attorneys who prosecuted these insurrectionists, Mr. Bove claimed heavy-handed tactics by prosecutors were equally unacceptable as physical violence against law enforcement. That is an outrageous and offensive statement by a man who wants to be a federal judge for life at the second highest court in the land. Since January 7th, 2021, there's been an effort by MAGA faithful to rewrite the history of January 6th, but I witnessed it, and many others did as well. The truth is this: the United States Capitol was violently attacked by insurrectionists intent on overturning the 2020 election results. The truth is this: 5 police officers died and more than 140 were injured, protecting this building, the staff, the visitors, and members of Congress. Mr. Bove also led the Justice Department's efforts to strike a corrupt bargain with New York City Mayor Eric Adams. This is an outrage, what he did. Mr. Bove stated that the charges would be dropped against Mayor Adams without prejudice so that Adams could, quote, devote full attention and resources to illegal immigration and violent crime. In other words, President Trump needed Mayor Adams to do his bidding on his deportation policy. In response, 2 staunch conservatives resigned from the Justice Department: a Trump-appointed interim U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon and lead prosecutor Hagan Scott. Mr. Scott wrote to Mr. Bove and quote, a quote that will be famous for a long, long time. He said it, Senator Blumenthal repeated it, I want to say it as well. Mr. Scott wrote to Mr. Bove, who wants this lifetime appointment to the bench, and said, I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. I don't know Mr. Scott, but I will tell you his words are persuasive and compelling. If that wasn't enough, Mr. Bove has shown utter disdain for our courts. A whistleblower stepped forward, gave his name, risked his future to tell us what Mr. Bove had told to the attorneys working on the case against the insurrectionists. According to this credible whistleblower, who provided ample documentation to back up his claims, Mr. Bove told the Department of Justice attorneys that they might need to say, quote, F you to federal courts that issue orders this administration doesn't agree with. Mr. President, that is the most dangerous comment that a person in the position of authority can make in the executive branch, that they will ignore the court orders that are issued against them. Yesterday, the Senate confirmed Joshua Devine to the federal bench. 34 years old, received his law degree 9 years ago, litigated for 5 years, and beyond his troubling lack of experience, he's taken some extreme positions. He calls himself a zealot. He calls himself a zealot when it comes to anti-choice. This zealotry has been on full display in his role as Missouri Solicitor General. He has challenged women's ability in his state to access the abortion drug mifepristone and has undermined the decision of Missouri voters to codify abortion access in their state constitution. Also deeply troubling, Mr. Devine argued in favor of literacy tests at the ballot box, stating that people who, quote, aren't informed about issues or platforms have no business voting. Now, where does that come from? In America, literacy tests, where does that come from? It comes from the era of Jim Crow. After the Civil War, when African Americans were given citizenship and an opportunity to vote, they were intimidated in many states when they tried to. They had to answer questions. How many bubbles in a bar of soap? What do letters of marque and reprisal mean in the Constitution? Impossible questions for anyone, including the lawyers and members of Congress. And yet, off they went. Why did they do it? To discriminate against black voters. Well, it turns out Mr. Devine believes that literacy tests should be restored. It shouldn't be controversial for anyone to say that nominee has disqualified himself. The fact that the body confirmed Mr. Devine is outrageous. These nominees are just the tip of the iceberg. President Trump is going to continue to nominate extreme unqualified individuals unless the Senate takes a stand. If a few of the senators, and I'm not going to name names, who've made statements about principles and values will stand by their own words when it comes to the orders of the court, then they'll join us on a bipartisan basis stopping some of these clearly unqualified individuals. I urge my colleagues, vote against Mr. Bove and all future nominees whose only loyalty is to the president and not to the Constitution. I yield the floor.